Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Are you or your team performing all possible vendor validations? Do you know which documents have the key data you need to confirm that the vendor you are about to create or update is real? Be sure by downloading the vendor validation reference list. It also has links to all the resources listed. Download at www.deborah, D-E-B-R-A, R. Richardson, RICHARDSON.com. Do you have an upcoming or are you living through a merger or acquisition of another company's accounts payable activity into yours? My guest today, Robert E Bendetti Jr., is a CPA, and he is here to talk about what 3 critical areas you should be focusing on. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 91, 3 critical areas for accounts payable to focus on during a merger or acquisition. And my guest is Robert E Bendetti Jr., and he is a CPA. And Robert is the Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Life Cycle Engineering. And as CFO, he is responsible for all financial operations of the company, as well as contracting, purchasing, marketing, sales operations, and IT. So welcome, Robert. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Good morning, Deborah. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here. And a little bit extra about me is before lifecycle engineering, I worked at a bunch of different industries, which I think is an awesome thing about accounting. And I'm sure you feel the same way. Our skills are completely transferable to any industry, which I think is awesome and is why I recommend accounting to young people. And other than sort of work stuff, I like to volunteer my time and I'm involved in the community and stuff that I am passionate about. And I feel kind of like a lifelong learner. So my wife likes to say I go to school a lot. And so got a couple master's degrees and CPA, kind of a non-traditional route to that. And happy to be here on the podcast.
All right, so lifelong learner, I love that. That is so true. I was actually on the route to a second master's degree, and then I relocated to Oklahoma, got busy, and you know how that goes. So kudos to you for finishing that out. Today, we're talking about mergers and acquisitions, and really for accounts payable, it means additional work absorbing the newly acquired or merged company into like your current operations. So we're going to talk about the 3 areas at AP the team that's absorbing the activities need to focus on. And the first one that you identified is digitizing AP, which I know is a hot topic now anyway with the recent increase in remote work. So what do you see as critical for AP in this area during an M&A or merger and acquisition?
Yeah, Deborah, so true. It seems like COVID has proven that we can work remotely. We can do these things anywhere. You got an internet connection and electricity. And I gotta be honest, I wasn't always a supporter of remote work. I was a little bit of a hater, and I was part of the reason some of the places I've worked didn't embrace it. But now I'm a convert. It's like a Saul to Paul conversion. To give a little New Testament reference, I love it. I think it's great, and really, gosh, I don't know if all, but most accounting processes can be done virtually, remotely, wherever. I mean, we have hubs and regional offices, so it's not like everybody's in the same bunker together now anyway.
Right.
And so I break up what we need to do into a couple of parts under the M&A umbrella. You know, you've completed a mergers and acquisition transaction, you've signed the paperwork, and that's really when the work begins for accounting. That baton's going to get passed to accounting and then to all team members, including AP. And one thing I would lean towards is you got to meet with both your existing team and this new team and look at the physical processes that are being done and where it could be digitized, where it could be, and not just digitized and make some physical processes digital, but also lean those processes, that there's always room for improvement. And then in leaning them, after leaning them out and getting those processes as lean as possible, then automating. And I make that important distinction because I love this Peter Drucker quote. He says, "Nothing is so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all." So there's no reason to automate a dumb step of a process. Get rid of the dumb step, then automate it using some sort of software to make everybody's life easier. So first lean, then automate. A lot of cool software tools to automate processes. And then a next step, after you've leaned them out and you've automated, if your process involves a bunch of different systems, further than automating a process using a software tool, you could use RPA or robotic process automation to make the whole thing more efficient and take out a bunch of non-value added boring steps, make everybody's life easier so people can do better, more important things. And I don't mean robots like a robot sitting in the accounting chair punching buttons. I mean, RPA just means instead of one, this is the way I do it, this is how I explain it as an accountant, is if you've got a system where right now, maybe you are pulling data out of something online and you're putting it into Excel. A process automation would be just that the software tool adds a feature, you can hit a button and it downloads itself. Okay, that's process automation. But if robotic process automation means not only is that working, but maybe you are having to merge data from a completely other database and then email it. Well, if the system could do all that together, download it, merge, then email and send out on demand without ever being asked at 8 a.m. to a big distribution, that's kind of a basic example of RPA. And I think that those are the kind of things are a great project when you've got an M&A initiative and you're working with the AP team.
Yeah, and I think a couple of great points there is one, you really need to look at the processes with the other accounts payable teams to see, you know, what can you cut out, lean those processes out. What are they doing that they really don't need to do? And that's especially true when you're doing that lift and shift, you know, meaning that you're bringing, instead of, you know, bringing those accounts payable transactions or vendor records into your existing vendor master file or accounting system or ERP, you're actually bringing on their accounting system and ERP and taking over those processes. And so you really need to look at those processes to see what you can lean out and then, you know, automate. And I love the RPA where now, especially again with the lift and shift, if you've got additional ERPs or accounting systems you're dealing with, you could utilize, you know, that rule-based software in order to automate some of the processes between those platforms or accounting systems or ERPs. So I think that's very key. Now, a second focus area is actually a painful flashback for me and any other AP vendor team member that has lived through extending the company's standard payment terms. Oh, that's not a pretty sight. So during an M&A, what are some tasks that need to be done to ensure that smooth transition?
Yeah, another important step when you're talking M&A transaction and accounts payable is cash management. And cash management's always important. I think it's the lifeblood of any organization, and it's certainly a chief financial officer, controller, treasurers, AP managers' key responsibility, I think, is cash management. We're stewards of cash. I think it's important for us to focus on it all the time, but certainly in something like we're talking about. And I would break it up a couple tips. One would be that you need to review all policies and procedures, not only of the acquired company, but I think it's a good time to look at your own company and pick best practices. The acquired company might have better policies and procedures than you do. And take a moment to take an honest assessment and pick the best practices. So that's one. Make sure the other company has policies and procedures, read them, pull out best practices, and merge them with yours, because there might be some great tips and tricks. Number two is, I think that you got to merge payment terms. You might have the same customer they have. You might be selling the same thing. And not only are you going to have to do huge pain in the butt projects like merging SKU numbers, but you also have to look at payment terms, and they might differ. And if they are different, Deborah, and you brought this up, you said extending payment terms, and usually if they're different, you're going to pick the one that's further out. But I think it's really important that you communicate early to those partners that the payment terms are different. You're going with these different payment terms, and I think you got to extend a grace period to small businesses, disadvantaged businesses, minority-owned businesses. Give them a heads up that this is happening next year. You don't drop the hammer on anybody right away. Small businesses manage their cash flow paycheck to paycheck, and so you can't surprise them. I've worked at small companies. I've been surprised. Don't be that guy. Don't be that gal. Give somebody, if you're going to change payment terms, give them a grace period and tell them this is happening, but it's happening next year, in my opinion. And then number two, I would review adherence to the policies and procedures at both your company and the acquired company. I'll give you an example and make it applicable to AP, is that I have worked at a company that acquired another business. They were a great competitor, and the owner wanted to sell out. We were happy to buy them. They had great people and they had great product. And in reviewing the payment terms, not only was AP not following the AP terms that they had in place to family members and relatives and neighbors of their community, they were paying some people very early. That was number one. Number two is the very wonderful person who worked in accounts payable actually cutting payments, electronic payments, had been working there for 30 years, and her process had always been to cut checks, quote unquote, the week before so that people received their check on time, which I think is very ethical. Now, 30 years later, we're sending like 99% ACH transactions, and she is still, quote unquote, cutting checks a week early and paying everyone a week early.
Wow.
Which is, hey, that's what she did. She always did it. That's what I do. I pull who's due next week. I cut checks now. I've been doing this for 30 years. And so it's good to have those quiet conversations and review adherence to payment terms, policies, and procedures. You might find something.
Yeah, and I think that's actually great. Some management oversight might have been good in that area, but definitely during a merger or acquisition, those things will come out and need to come out as that transition from one AP department moves to another AP department. So on the cash management and the payment terms and the changing of those payment terms, I have been involved in where, we're extending payment terms company-wide. And one of the big areas that we found, and you brought this up with the M&A too, is that, as these payment terms are changing, accounts payable is not necessarily adhering to them. And one of the pain points behind that, or one of the causes of that, is just the fact that we had like a separate sourcing and procurement team outside of accounts payable. And when they updated payment terms, that didn't always get to AP so that we could update, right, the accounting system or ERP, that vendor master record, so that when the payment was scheduled, it was not based on the updated payment terms. So I don't know if you have any tips there, but I saw that, or we found that that was a huge issue between, not adhering to the agreed payment terms outside and even after an acquisition when that information got into our vendor record, because now they became part of, what we needed to keep updated.
Yeah, I think that's a common lament, is that there's some folks in every organization and they're real good at what they do, but they don't always update the system of record or really follow any rules.
Yeah.
And so, that's how we earn our paycheck, is sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but we're following behind people and we're the adult in the room, and we've got to double check stuff like that and just assume somebody isn't doing their job and they agreed to something without finding out the unintended consequences or who they needed to communicate to. And that's super inefficient. And I hate to say it like that, like, no, everybody should follow policies and procedures and there should be a system of record and everybody should just do their job. It doesn't work like that. So it is I would say, Deborah, I think it should be a part of every manager, senior manager, executive's job at some cycle, at some period, to just double check adherence to the policies and procedures, the things that you think are happening, because often they're not.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the third critical area is cyber fraud. And again, this is definitely a critical area, especially as we continue to live through this unprecedented time that spiked fraud attempts. So what are you seeing as a trend in the current scams, and what unique issues should AP look out for during a merger or acquisition?
Yeah, reading some recent professional journals, I'm reading that they are reporting an increase in cyber crime attempts and cyber crime success. And I'm certainly experiencing, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing like a 2x, 3x increase in the number of emails that I'm starting to see. And some of them are obviously clearly fake, and some of them aren't. Some of them are pretty good. And there's a bunch of old tricks that we all know about, and I've seen some new tricks. At least to me, I saw a new trick recently that was AP related. I saw one where they were requesting, they had ghosted an internal employee's email address, and it appeared that it was internal, and they were requesting an aging report. And at first I was like, why in the world would somebody want an aging report? And then it dawned on me, oh, obviously it'll have our contact information for our customers. It'll have invoice information and details only LCE, lifecycle engineering accounting, should know. And they will reach out to all of our customers and requesting to change remittance and steal all our money. I'm still fired up about that.
So what did you do with that email, or with those emails?
Well, it was a training moment. It was like a hot reminder to me to be vigilant, and then a quick alert to everybody in the company, like, hey, the scammers are stepping up their game. And number 3, I actually posted something on LinkedIn to help my bean counter brothers and sisters that unfortunately the criminals are putting in some overtime, coming up with new and crafty ways to steal our money. And I got a call to action, I think, to all accountants and accounts payable team members in particular, is if somebody reaches out to you to change payment terms, that you need to have some sort of dual authentication process. And it doesn't matter how many times they email you or call you or how annoying they are, you follow that policies and procedure, and you go to the permanent file of that partner, and you contact the original phone number or email address. You don't reply back and go, oh, I need you to, can you have somebody else in your organization email me? Well, yeah, of course, they'll find another scammer. So I'm hot. I'm still hot, Deborah. You got me fired up.
Well, what I like about that is you shared that with your internal team members because they all need to be notified so they can all watch out for that. Because typically, right, the scammers or the cyber criminals will reach out to multiple team members at all levels. And so if you see that you receive a fraudulent email, you need to let everybody know about that so that if they receive it as well, they know and are aware that it is a fraudulent email. So that part is really that's really critical, is letting other folks know. And you actually went beyond that. You let everyone in your network know. So that was great.
Yeah, I really start to wonder, like as these scammers get more sophisticated,
Mhm.
like some of them are pretty good. Like you could just make an honest living. Like you're working pretty hard, you're clearly smart, and like there are jobs in
Yeah,
inside sales. Like it's just it frustrates me. It must be
yeah.
clearly profitable or they'd get a real job, but it's super annoying.
It is. And one of the things I like to do is I like to post where these scammers or fraudsters have been caught. And so just to say, yes, people are getting caught at it. And I know it's not a large volume, but it is being investigated. It is being followed through. Some folks are being caught for it. But in the meantime, make sure you protect yourself and make sure you let your company, your network know about these attempts that are out there, and they are getting sophisticated. I did read one thing though that said some of the fraudsters will intentionally use spelling mistakes so they can weed out those folks that are too smart to fall for it, so they don't waste their time on it. And so they know if they get someone that responds or clicks on the link or something, that they know they have someone that they can
Huh.
defraud. So that was kind of interesting. I thought, they're intentionally doing that.
Wow.
Yeah. So they are
I
evolving in their thinking.
one just a tip to speak to the sophistication level,
Yeah.
as I am and maybe others are. We're a little more present. We have a virtual presence. For me, it's
Hmm.
LinkedIn, and people are watching that. And as we tried at my firm, we're a professional service firm, so we try to be visible experts in quotation mark for Robert Bendetti. Okay, I don't know if I'm an expert, but we try to be visible. But the unintended consequence of that is people see when I'm speaking
Hmm.
somewhere. If I'm at a conference, I'm publicizing it. Hey, come see me at this accounting conference. Well, they know it. And so I jump on a plane and they're emailing my accounting department. Hey, this is Robert Bendetti. I need you to wire
Yeah.
$3,200 to this account immediately. And that's an actual example. And it wasn't an accident of the timing. And so we all just need to be vigilant. The sophistication stepping up. There's probably some
Yeah.
software tool that tracks social media posts and alerts the scammers when executives are traveling. And if
Yeah.
Deborah, we might need to create that. Like, and then what we do
Wow.
is here's the big brain trick. Okay, Deborah, you and I create this, and then whoever buys the software, boom, turn them into the FBI.
Wow. You know what? I don't know anything about coding, but let's see where we can start.
All right, please reach
I
out to
love
me
it.
if you are a programmer. Deborah and I want to get in on this. All right, Deborah will run the admin. I'll run sales.
We'll put some happy
We
in
need
it.
to, we need
I love that. You know what? Brainstorming on a podcast. This may be the next big thing. Who knows?
to start a podcast.
Start another podcast. There we go. All right. So until our startup is off and going, what other tips would you recommend for accounts payable teams before and after an M&A?
I'll break this down into 3 E's that I think is important for AP team members and really the entire accounting team, but AP in particular. And I'll start, my first E is going to be education. And I think that professional certifications, as an example, are really important for everybody in accounting and certainly AP. But there's there is a professional certification out there. And even if you got one, get two. If you got two, get three. That I just think that's really important. And it's made a big impact in my life. And so it's something I like to promote in others is E for education. That I think is another tip. And then my second E would be experience. I think as AP professionals, as accounting professionals, I think experience in cross training is really important. And not just AP, but learning AR, help with collections and invoicing and accounts receivable. Volunteer to do a physical inventory count. You know, when some of the other accounting team members have to come in on Saturday and do the annual physical count, volunteer and come out and help. Teach a class on something to the rest of the organization. There's no better way to learn than to prepare to teach it to others. And then my final E after education and experience, I put exposure. And an example of that I would say is volunteering. And whether that volunteering is in professional organizations that you're a member of because you got a professional certification, because you listened to me, or it could be that you're volunteering in industry organizations. So you're the accountant on an engineering association or a manufacturing association. You could volunteer at a faith-based organization, at your synagogue or your church or your mosque. And then in your community, there are civic organizations that need you. They need us, that need accountants. They are in desperate need of somebody on that finance committee, and they would be super happy, big smiles on their face if you emailed or called. And it's important, especially right now. Don't talk about it, be about it. Don't spend 2 hours a day posting on social media about somebody needs to be doing something. Be about it, be that person, and reach out to that professional organization, that industry organization, that faith-based or that civic organization in your community and make a difference.
Yeah, I think that is so important, the volunteering aspect. And particularly, I like the fact that you brought up that it really helps you learn. And one of the things that I've recently done is I have volunteered as an education manager for a cybersecurity or cyber safety organization that really relies on volunteers. So, you know, those organizations that rely on volunteers, they need you, they'll welcome you to come in. But I volunteered to provide content because I do that anyway, and I really focus on process side of cyber safety within accounts payable. But as a result of volunteering, and it's been a very short time, even in that short time, I'm learning things about, you know, cybersecurity careers, what positions are out there, what skills you need for them, other tips for being safe in this cyber threat world. And even though I signed up to provide education as far as process, there's a lot that I'm learning on the other end in the cybersecurity world that I wasn't necessarily involved in. So I think it's a win-win, to your point, for both the organization that needs volunteers, that needs your skill set, and then also for the person, because you are widening your expertise and experience and exposure in that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this was great information and tips for accounts payable that really is applicable at all levels, and similarly to share best practices and discuss current financial issues. You started the Charleston CFO Council a couple years ago, the Upstate CFO Council last year, and next month you're expanding globally with the Global CFO Council. And all sound like really good resources for senior AP leadership, especially now as everyone is still trying to figure out what the new normal is going to be. Can you talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah, you heard it here, folks, first. Deborah, I mentioned this to you last week that I was going to kick off a global CFO council. So now I got, I guess, 2 weeks until you post this podcast to really do it. But yeah, a few years ago, I moved to Charleston and just wanted to find an educational and networking forum for senior financial executives. And I just couldn't find anything that had just a bunch of senior financial executives. And so I I talked about doing something for a couple of years, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to take my own advice. I'm going to be about it instead of talk about it. And I just started it with a co-founder who's since retired and moved on, but a great guy. And we've got 350 members in Charleston who meet, and we've been meeting virtually and for WebExes now during the COVIDs, but normally have breakfast meetings and we just meet for fellowship and learning and education. And we also allow resource companies to be members, like bankers and lawyers and CPAs. They make a contribution to be a member of the council, and then we give that money away to the Educational Foundation for Women in Accounting. And the EFWA has been around for like 60 years, giving scholarships and providing mentorship to women pursuing degrees in accounting, whether that's undergrad or grad or PhDs. And it's just a really great organization. And so I thought it would be a cool way for this group of senior financial executives to have like a charity partner and give back. So replicated it in the upstate a year ago, and now we've got 300 members in the upstate, and we meet monthly and do the same thing, and they give money to the EFWA too. We gave just last week, we made our 2020 contribution, which was $25,000. So I think it's pretty cool. And then last week when I was brainstorming with you, I was like, Deborah, there's really no reason I couldn't do this anyway. And I feel I'm just being lazy. And I need to get off the stick, is how my grandma would have called it. Yeah. Get off the stick. And I don't have any idea what that means, but it implied I needed to work and get it done. So I thought that this organization would be something great to provide elsewhere. And so what it's going to be is the Global CFO Council. People can join that if they're senior financial executives. And then immediately they'll be able to participate in the monthly WebExes, where we'll bring great content for educational and learning. And then where any 25 or more are gathered in a city, we'll start like a fellowship or a mastermind group, or what I'm calling a Spark Cell, so people can meet quarterly. And then if there's, once we get 100 in any given city, I'll kick off the monthly breakfast meetings like I've done in Charleston and Greenville.
Nice. And I think that is a great forum or platform to provide senior level executives to come and talk about what they see and what's trending in their company, and just share that so that the C-levels can start looking at issues as a business risk and just see what other folks are out there doing with it. I think that's a great idea. And maybe in my state, Oklahoma, we can get something going. What did you say? 25 needed to have some focus on your state?
Yeah, 25 or more in the metropolitan area. I'll kick off a Spark Cell for quarterly fellowship, and then 100 or more. Once we hit that, we'll kick off the monthly breakfast meetings.
So you've got a 2-week goal now, because the podcast is going to be out in a couple of weeks for this Global CFO Council. So maybe I'll take a 2-week or maybe even a month's goal to see if I can get 25 senior finance executives together in Oklahoma so we can get that Spark Cell. How about that?
Sounds great. Send them to globalcfocouncil.com.
Perfect. All right. So thanks a lot for coming on. I know we learned a lot about M&A, the 3 critical areas being digitizing AP, cash management, and then also cyber fraud. So can you tell the audience, if we want some more information about you, where we can connect with you, or where we can go to just look up some more information?
I would love to connect with folks on LinkedIn. That's where I like to kind of have my virtual presence. And if you Google Robert E Bendetti Jr., it's the first thing that'll pop up. I think I'm the only Robert E Bendetti Jr. in the United States of America.
Okay.
There's not a lot of Bendettis in America. And so that's the easiest place, is LinkedIn. And I'd love to connect.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Robert, for being on the podcast, and maybe we'll have you back on to talk a little bit more about the Global CFO Council, and then see if I did get 25 people interested here in the Oklahoma area for that Spark Cell. How about that?
That would be awesome. It would be my pleasure.
All right. Thanks, Robert.
So thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 91st episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.